Okay, so we're going to take a look at the recurring billing contract, and this time we're going to process an order management contract. So we have multi-company enabled. We can pick a customer. Now this is kind of important here if you want to bill. We can separate out who gets the invoice from the end user, who the contract is for. So if you're using a channel for sales, the AR customer would be the person you want to bill, in this case your channel partner, where the customer ID could be the customer. We're going to see that this is integrated into CRM and has some other integrations as you see in other videos, and some messages may come up, but right now we're just going to focus on the billing and revenue recognition side of this. So in this case, by the setup, we said that contracts are a year defaults and they need 30 days to warn to start the renewal process. And there's a whole renewal process that we'll get into in another video, which allows us to track renewed contracts, renew them, change the pricing, escalated dollars, consolidate contracts, and then also track renewals and non-renewals for reasons and do forecasting based on that. We have multiple revenue recognition types, either contract or invoice. We're going to stay with invoice. We'll touch on contract later, but the revenue will be recognized when the invoice is processed. Multiple statuses: open, closed, canceled, renewal pending, not renewed, and hold. In this case, we're going to leave it as open. I'm going to make it order management. We're going to leave the contract as a term contract, meaning it's for the period of time and not a perpetual where it's ongoing. So in this case, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do quarterly. I'm going to generate the auto schedule. So it's going to save the changes. I have a lot of flexibility as to how I put this contract together, but in this case, I'm going to go in and pick an item that is quarterly software as a service. So in this case, I'm going to bypass the project. System is project enabled based on the account. I'm going to bill $500 per quarter for each of the for each quarter of the 4 bills on this one contract. I also have built into it the revenue recognition type that was associated with that product quarterly, and it's going to book that 3 periods and book it every period. Start as open. These could be overridden or left to default. I'm going to enter into this the control total. And the idea here is, though, on the auto schedule, I could generate this as many times as I would like. I could delete all the unbilled items and do this for a particular auto generation ID. So I can have monthly, quarterly, annual bills all generated in this one contract with the ability to overwrite them at any time. And I also could overwrite or manually update any one single bill for an additional charge for that period, or to make changes to that can be copied down to the rest of the bills in the contract, or just step alone on there. So here I'm going to walk through a couple of other things. We can have a contract class. We'll take a look at that a little bit in more detail. And here I have the ability to go in and say, for contract class 1, to software maintenance agreements, when I'm on a perpetual type, just assume that 100% of them are renewed. I don't have any shrinkage. But when I'm billing this, when I'm forecasting out for each of these contract classes, I'm assuming that 98% renew that are a year old, and 95%, as you can see here, going down to 90%. As the contract ages, I get less of a renewal, and that's what I want to use for my forecasting purposes. I can link them to contract. I can assume that I'm using the last billed item as my renewal source, or I could just duplicate the entire contract. So if I had mixed amounts or split amounts, I will do that. I'm going to enter, just to quickly enter description. I passed that before. Order management information. I can put some additional information here. Override the ship to address. This is going to appear on the sales order. Put in a purchase order number. I'm going to pick a credit card, and the system is warning me that the contract terms do not match the credit card terms, and that's okay. I can actually change that to get rid of that message, so I'll just make it a credit card transaction, just warning me on that. In addition, I'm now going to go back, and as I did before, I'm going to generate the bill. So it's going to create an OM order and then process that OM order through Process Manager. It's now going to release that and generate an invoice because that's what the order type was set up to do. Now, once it does that, I'm going to run the sales journal. It's going to generate the revenue recognition schedules, so you can see that in a second. So here you can see we have the invoice for the software as a service for the $500 quarterly generated to that. And this is a standard SL invoice that you can modify. You know, it's a crystal report. Let Process Manager complete this. Let me just close this screen. We're going to go into the order management functions. This is standard SL. So one of the things to do is to run the sales journal. Now that's to post that invoice as to accounts receivable and to general ledger, and in this case we've also extended that to automatically generate any contracts we need or to generate any of the revenue recognition schedules that were set up on those items. And what I didn't show in the contract is I entered a single item. I could enter as many as I needed to fulfill the contract line to break each of those bills out into individual components. So now I'm going to go back into the MaxQ contract. I'm going to call up the last contract, which should be the one we're working. We can see now that that has been generated. And here I have the revenue recognition schedules. And on there I can see that I now have 3 periods going out over 5, 6, and 7 for the first quarter, recognize the revenue each monthly, and then tie this back into the individual components that were needed to make this, to complete that revenue recognition part. So in the schedule itself, there's a separate video on this, but I also can see that I have the 3 periods, the source of those entries, and I'm recognized revenue coming from the deferred revenue account being moved into the revenue account. And the original document information, and I have adjustments which are a special way to reclassify a single line item being posted there, not used very heavily on there. Now, as I was saying before, I can actually go into this schedule, edit distributions, and I could add a number of other items on there if I so desired, which if we put something on here, let's say we want to bill for maintenance on there, I can do the same thing that I did before, order 1, close this, and now it's going to ask me, do I want to copy that to the rest of the lines. So if I go into further distribution, you can see that was added. So again, we made it easy to maintain those particular items on there, on those particular contracts, fairly easy to use. And that kind of takes you through order management contracts and the tie back to sales orders. Okay, in this video we're going to show now starting the process offer from a sales order. So in this example, the relationship with the customer starts with the selling of an item, and that is going to trigger the generation of revenue recognition schedules and contracts, mostly for renewal purposes, but we're going to show 2 examples of this. The first one, I'm just going to pick a customer. I'm going to change the order type to, again, be the one that goes directly to invoice. And now I'm going to pick 2 items. The first one is a software item. So this is going to be, we're going to sell our popular LaserCheck product, and we're going to sell the maintenance associated with that. And the maintenance on here has a special need because it needs to be to have revenue recognized, and it also needs to be set up to renew this maintenance agreement in a year from now. So we have modified the standard sales order to add revenue recognition related items directly on the sales order. And in this case, There is nothing entered for the software item as you would expect. The software is going to be recognized right away. But on the laser checks, the default is coming from the revenue type associated with maintenance, and it's a 12-month period. We're recognizing it every period, and we're starting, and I could override any of the values that default from the revenue type maintenance. So with that, I'm just going to go finish the order. Now Process Manager is going to kick off and create invoices for that, like we've seen a number of times. So we see here we actually have the invoice generated for those two line items on there. Standard SL invoice again. Let Process Manager close out the item. I'm going to close out the sales order. I'm going to click on the sales journal. Again, a standard SL function. Typically this is run once or a couple times a day. Click on the preview. Find the order that we put in, the $1,180. Close this out and let it process to accounts receivable, GL, and then generate the contract as well as the revenue recognition schedules that we need for the maintenance item only. So that's completed. Now I'm going to go into the MaxQ revenue recognition. We're going to go into the contract. We'll call up the last contract. We can see it's for AdventureWorks. We can see that it's already generated for that particular sales order. It's an annual contract. I have revenue recognition schedules associated with that. So based on this contract, I could go in here and see that I'm now posting, $15 a month across that particular year for those 12 periods. And I'm rebooking this from deferred revenue into software revenue. Very much what I saw before. But the other thing I want to point out now is this is then scheduled to renew in a year from now. So let me go through and let's just say that a year has gone by, and I would click on the renew button, or I would run one of our inquiries to tell you the orders that need to be renewed. I could go in and pick one or more items on there. I could go in and add a multiplier for an escalation, or just generate the schedules. So this is now going to generate the same amount. If there were effective dates on price increases, that would be applied there. And it just generated a new contract. And now it's going to launch that contract for what I was on. Notice how it's in renewal pending. So now in order to send this contract out to our prospect, the customer, we can use a feature of Doc Agent that it's embedded in recurring billing. And I'm going to click on the fax email button here. Now it's going to take me up to one of the Doc Agent forms, our quick send form, which allows me to enter any individual that I would like to send a one-off, or which would stay with this contract. Or I can click, and what I'm going to do in this case is click on the standard contact tab. And these are contacts that were set up against the customer for individual document setups, so that I can say, in this case, anytime the renewal notice is generated, I want it to go to, in this case, I'm using myself as an example. So I'm just going to click the send button. It's going to send the reports to the standard contracts. And now I'm back at the form. And I'm going to show what that looks like in a second, but just to give you an idea of our tracking here, if I go into the distributions button and I expand by hitting F4 that line, I can see we have our renewal notice section added here, and on it we're tracking two contract numbers. In this case they're the same because it was a new contract that we renewed only once, but I retain the original contract that was created. We also remember the last contract that this particular contract, in this case 37, was renewed against 36, and it's in its first renewal, and the status currently is not renewed. So I will keep track of all of the renewals over the life of this contract relationship with this customer, and we can use then the acceptance rates against the renewal rates against these particular contracts to feed the forecasting that we saw previously that was entered on the contract maintenance based on the age and the number of renewals that were happening against each contract. So we keep a complete closed loop on the renewals. So that was, just to summarize, we went through and just by creating a sales order, we were able to set up the revenue recognition schedules and a contract to be renewed, renew that contract. We saw how we can then send that using Doc Agent out to our customer or prospect, and then have the tracking of that renewals for analytics happen during the course of the process. Okay, we're going to take a look now at the email that was sent to me. So you can see here under Google, I got a reference number and reference in the contract I just created. And if I click on that, I can go in and view the form. So here's a example of a renewal notice that was sent out, instructions on how to do the renewal. And this could be sent out by email or fax, and just an example of the document. It is a crystal document that you can customize to whatever your needs are. So again, just an example of what one of these renewal notices may look like.